The crystal chandeliers of the grand ballroom did not flatter the grease stains on Finnegan Rourke's utility coveralls. He stood center stage, a dark smudge against the pristine cream carpet, while 500 wealthy shareholders whispered behind manicured hands. Blaise Quarrington, the director of investor relations, paced around him like a tiger circling a wounded deer, broadcasting the mechanics' alleged incompetence on the massive 4K screens behind them. In the shadowed wings of the stage, Isolde Van Meer watched with tears trapped in her eyes, clutching a clipboard that contained the lie that would destroy him. She had chosen her nursing license over his dignity, a trade made in the dark that was now coming to light under the harsh glare of corporate scrutiny. But as the laughter rippled through the crowd, they missed the subtle weight of the leather-bound ledger Finnegan held tight against his chest. It wasn't a repair log. It was a weapon of mass corporate destruction, and the safety was about to come off. Watch closely, because the price of admission is about to skyrocket. The freight elevator groaned in the shaft like a dying beast. Finnegan wiped his hands on a rag stained with old oil. He preferred the silence of the gears to the lobby noise. The mechanical heart of the building was his only true sanctuary. It was here that he could think without the constant judgment. He tightened the bolt on the main pulley with precise force. This machine was the only thing in the tower he trusted. Isolde stepped into the car before he could close the grate. She wore the sterile white uniform of the Executive Health Wing. Her eyes darted to the camera in the corner of the ceiling. She knew they were watching, even in the service areas now. Finnegan paused, his wrench hovering in the heavy, stale air. He didn't speak, but his gaze asked the question she feared. She pressed the button for the 45th floor with trembling fingers. The ride up was a slow ascent into a dangerous intimacy. The hum of the motor covered the sound of their breathing. He moved closer, smelling of iron and heavy industrial grease. She smelled of antiseptic and expensive, subtle floral perfume. They were two ghosts haunting the vertical spine of the corporation. He reached out, his rough thumb grazing her wrist gently. She flinched, not from fear, but from the sudden, sharp guilt. "They are auditing the maintenance logs again," she whispered softly. Finnegan nodded, his eyes fixed on the changing floor numbers. He knew the audit was just a pretext for something darker. Blaise Quarrington was looking for a scapegoat to calm investors. "Let them look, Isolde, I have nothing to hide from them." She looked away, unable to meet the honesty in his face. She knew that innocence was no shield against what was coming. The elevator shuddered as it passed the 30th floor mark. It was a small tremor, but it made her gasp aloud. Finnegan steadied her with a hand on the small of her back. The touch burned through the thin fabric of her white scrub top. For a moment, the corporate war outside felt miles away. There was only the hum, the heat, and the unspoken promise. But the camera lens in the corner blinked a slow red. "You should not be seen with me," he said quietly. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated in the floor. "I don't care about their rules anymore," she lied poorly. She cared because her debt was tied to their employment. Blaise knew about her student loans and her sick mother. He held her future in his manicured, ring-adorned hands. Finnegan saw the shadow cross her face but misread the source. The doors opened onto the executive floor with a soft chime. The polished marble hallway stretched out like a gleaming tongue. Isolde stepped out, the separation immediate and physically painful. "Be careful, Finnegan," she said without looking back at him. He watched the doors slide shut, sealing him in darkness. The red light of the camera held its unblinking stare. He knew the storm was gathering, but he stayed still. Lunch was usually a solitary affair on the windy rooftop. Finnegan sat with his legs dangling over the city edge. The wind whipped his dark hair across his grime-streaked forehead. He opened a metal box containing a sandwich and an apple. Below him, the city moved like a colony of ants. He owned a view that billionaires paid millions to possess. But he paid for it with sweat and invisible labor. Isolde found him there, shivering in the biting autumn chill. She brought 2 coffees and paper cups stamped with logos. You will catch your death out here, she scolded gently. He took the cup, his fingers brushing hers for a second. The cold keeps me sharp, he replied with a rare smile. She sat beside him, tucking her skirt under her legs. The distance between them was shrinking with every secret meeting. Blaze was asking about the parts inventory this morning, she said. Finnegan took a bite of his apple, chewing slowly, methodically. Blaze worries too much about nuts and bolts, he muttered. He thinks someone is stealing copper from the renovation site. Finnegan laughed, a dry sound that was carried away by wind. He should look at the accounts, not the scrap metal. Isolde froze, her coffee cup pausing halfway to her lips. What do you know about the accounts? She asked nervously. He looked at her, his eyes dark and unreadable today. I hear things in the walls, Isolde, the building talks. It was a cryptic answer that did not settle her stomach. She knew he was smarter than a simple elevator mechanic. His vocabulary was too precise, his hands too deliberate. But she was too afraid to ask who he really was. He pulled a small, worn book from his heavy pocket. It wasn't the maintenance log she had seen him carry. The cover was leather, cracked and faded by decades of use. He made a note in it with a short pencil stub. Just tracking the wind speed, he said, catching her stare. She didn't believe him, but she didn't press the issue. Her own secrets were heavy enough to carry without his. If I lost this job, I would lose everything, she confessed. The wind howled louder, masking the crack in her voice. Finnegan turned to her, his expression softening into serious concern. You won't lose it, I promise you that, no matter what. You can't promise that against men like Blaze, she argued. I can promise more than you think, he said firmly. The conviction in his voice frightened her more than the wind. The break was over too soon, the reality rushing back. She stood up, smoothing the wrinkles from her white uniform. I have to go before the shift supervisor notices me. He nodded, staying seated on the dangerous edge of the roof. Go on, Isolde, keep your head down for one more day. She left him there, a silhouette against the gray sky. He opened the ledger again, writing down the exact time. The fluorescent lights of the clinic hummed with aggressive brightness. Isolde was sorting patient files when the shadow fell over her. Blaze Quarrington stood in the doorway, blocking the only exit. His suit cost more than her father made in a year. Nurse Van Meer, he purred, stepping into the small, sterile room. Mr. Quarrington, she replied, her heart hammering against her ribs. We need to discuss the irregularity in the elevator logs. He placed a folder on the stainless steel counter between them. Inside were photos of her and Finnegan on the rooftop. Grainy, Zoomedin shots that looked illicit and conspiring. Fraternizing with maintenance is against the corporate culture code. He smiled, showing teeth that were too white and too straight. We were just talking, she defended, her voice thin. Talking about stolen copper, perhaps? He suggested, leaning closer. The smell of his expensive cologne was suffocating in the room. Finnegan didn't steal anything, she said, her hands shaking. Loyalty is a virtue, but poverty is a terrible vice. He tapped the file with a manicured fingernail, creating a rhythm. Your mother's care facility is expensive, isn't it, Isolde? The threat hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. He knew everything about her financial desperation and leverage points. What do you want from me? She whispered, defeated. Blaze walked around the counter, invading her personal space. I need a witness who saw him moving the inventory. But I didn't see that, she protested, tears welling up. Memory is a flexible thing when survival is at stake. He placed a pen on top of the damning photos. Sign the statement, and your mother's bills are paid. She looked at the pen, then at the door. Finnegan's face flashed in her mind, his gentle, rough hands. But then she saw the eviction notices on her kitchen table. Blaze waited, his patience as polished as his Italian shoes. He is just a mechanic, Isolde, he is nobody. The words were a calculated strike at her fear. He will be fired, nothing more, Blaze lied smoothly. I can't do that to him, she tried one last time. Then you can explain to your mother why she is moving. The cruelty of the choice paralyzed her lungs and mind. She picked up the pen, the plastic feeling like lead. Blaze watched her, his eyes gleaming with predatory satisfaction. He didn't care about the truth, only the quarterly report. A scapegoat was needed, and he had found the knife. She didn't sign it then, pushing the paper away. I need time to think, she gasped, rushing past him. Blaze laughed as she fled into the busy hallway. You have until the shareholders' meeting, Nurse Van Meer. His voice chased her down the corridor like a hound. She ran to the bathroom and locked the stall door. She vomited into the toilet, her body rejecting the betrayal. Finnegan sensed the shift in the building's atmosphere immediately. Security guards were patrolling the basement levels in pairs. They watched him work with suspicious, narrowed eyes. He ignored them, focusing on the hydraulic pressure gauges. He knew Blaze was tightening the noose around his neck. He checked his ledger, calculating the days remaining. The timing had to be perfect, or everything was lost. He tried to find Isolde, but she was avoiding him. She didn't answer his calls on the internal line. She wasn't on the roof, nor in the cafeteria. Her absence was a cold void in his day. He knew Blaze had gotten to her, somehow. He felt a surge of anger, not at her, but him. They always used the weak to break the strong. Late that afternoon, he found a note in his locker. It was unsigned, written in a shaky, hurried hand. They are watching the inventory logs, please be careful. He crumpled the paper, his jaw setting into granite. He didn't need warnings, he needed to act now. He walked to the main server room in the basement. The door was locked, but he had the master key. Inside the server room, the lights blinked in patterns. He bypassed the security camera with a simple loop. He accessed the main terminal, his fingers flying fast. He wasn't stealing data, he was securing his own evidence. He downloaded the proxy voting records for the last decade. The printer hummed, spitting out pages of dense numbers. He folded them and tucked them inside his coveralls. As he left the room, he ran into the head of security. Lost, Rourke? The large man asked, hand on his belt. Just checking the cooling fans, Finnegan replied calmly. Stay in the elevator shafts, grease monkey, the guard spat. Finnegan walked away, feeling the eyes on his back. They thought he was a rat in the walls. They didn't know he built the maze they ran in. He found Isolde later, hiding in the laundry storage. She jumped when he entered, dropping a stack of sheets. Stay away from me, Finnegan, please, she begged him. What did he say to you? He demanded gently. He knows about the money, about my mother, she cried. He reached for her, but she pulled away sharply. I can't lose my job, I just can't, she sobbed. You won't have to choose, he said, voice intense. I already have, she whispered, looking at the floor. The words hit him harder than a physical blow. He realized then that the trap was already sprung. She was the weapon they were using to kill him. He looked at her with sadness, not anger, just sorrow. Do what you have to do, he said softly. The morning of the shareholders' meeting broke gray and cold. The tower was buzzing with nervous, kinetic energy. Catering staff rushed trays of expensive pastries to the ballroom. Finnegan was summoned to the director's office at 9. He walked in, wearing his clean but worn work uniform. Blaze sat behind a mahogany desk the size of a car. Isolde stood in the corner, staring at the carpet. Mr. Rourke, we have some serious allegations, Blaze began. He held up the report Isolde had signed the night before. Theft of corporate property, falsification of maintenance logs. Finnegan looked at Isolde, but she wouldn't lift her head. And we have a witness, Blaze added with a smirk. Is this true, Isolde? Finnegan asked, his voice steady. She nodded imperceptibly, a tear falling to the floor. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. I see, Finnegan said, turning his gaze back to Blaze. You are terminated, obviously, Blaze said, signing a form. But first, we need to clear this with the board. You're taking me to the meeting? Finnegan asked, surprised. We need to show the investors we are cleaning house. Blaze wanted a public execution to distract from falling stocks. Security guards stepped forward to flank Finnegan on both sides. Escort him to the holding area backstage, Blaze ordered. Isolde let out a small sob as they grabbed his arms. Finnegan didn't resist, he walked with his head high. He looked at Isolde one last time as he left. It's okay, he mouthed, a forgiveness she didn't deserve. The door closed, leaving her alone with the monster. You did well, Isolde, Blaze said, checking his watch. Can I go now? She asked, her voice hollow. No, you need to be there to confirm the report. You promised I wouldn't have to speak, she panicked. Plans change, my dear, bring your clipboard and smile. He swept past her, leaving the scent of expensive cologne. She stood in the office, trapped in her own nightmare. Backstage, Finnegan sat on a folding chair in the dark. He could hear the murmurs of the crowd through the curtain. He reached into his uniform and touched the leather book. The guard watched him but didn't bother to search him. Who worries about a mechanic with a dirty old book? Finnegan closed his eyes and visualized the next hour. Pain was coming, but so was the ultimate truth. The grand ballroom was packed with the city's elite. Men in dark suits and women in pearls filled the seats. Cameras on cranes swooped over the crowd, broadcasting live. The huge screens displayed graphs of declining quarterly profits. Blaze walked onto the stage to polite, anxious applause. He smiled, the perfect image of corporate confidence and control. Ladies and gentlemen, we are trimming the fat, he announced. Finnegan watched on a monitor from the wings, waiting. We have identified the leaks in our efficiency, Blaze continued. It starts with the rot in our maintenance department. The crowd murmured, confused by the focus on low-level staff. Bring him out, Blaze commanded into his microphone headset. The guards pulled Finnegan up and shoved him toward the light. He stumbled onto the stage, blinded by the spotlights. The audience gasped at the sight of his dirty clothes. He looked like a stain on their perfect white world. Isolde was pushed out from the other side, clutching her board. She looked small and terrified next to the polished director. This man, Blaze pointed, has been stealing from you. Finnegan stood center stage, blinking, saying absolutely nothing. He looked at the sea of faces, searching for allies. He stole copper, tools, and time, Blaze lied effortlessly. And he corrupted our staff to cover his tracks. Blaze gestured to Isolde, who was trembling visibly now. Nurse Van Meer, please confirm the signature on this report. A camera zoomed in on her tear-streaked, pale face. Yes, she whispered into the microphone, her voice cracking. It is my signature, she admitted, condemning the man she loved. The shareholders shook their heads in collective disgust. Criminal charges will be filed, Blaze promised the room. We are purging the corruption to protect your dividends. It was a show trial, a distraction from the failing numbers. Finnegan felt the heat of the lights on his skin. He saw the pity and contempt in their eyes. He waited for Blaze to finish his victory lap. Do you have anything to say, Mr. Rourke? Blaze mocked. He held the microphone out, expecting silence or begging. Finnegan reached into his pocket and pulled out the ledger. The leather was dark and worn against his blue uniform. I do have a question, Finnegan said, his voice clear. The sound system amplified his calm amidst the storm. I want to ask about the Class A shares. A ripple of confused laughter moved through the room. The mechanic is a stock analyst now, Blaze joked. The crowd chuckled, obeying the cue from the stage. Class A shares are for the founding family, Blaze dismissed. And they are all held in a blind trust. Exactly, Finnegan said, opening his book to a marked page. A trust that requires a physical signature for proxy votes. Blaze's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Security, remove him, he is wasting our time, he snapped. I have the floor as a shareholder, Finnegan stated. You are not a shareholder, Blaze spat, losing his cool. Check the ledger, Finnegan said, holding up the old book. This is the original registry from 1952. The legal counsel at the front table suddenly sat up. Isolde looked at Finnegan, her eyes wide with shock. She had seen that book a dozen times before. She thought it was a diary or a work log. That is a prop, Blaze yelled over the growing murmurs. It is the founding document, Finnegan corrected, voice hard. He turned the book toward the camera crane overhead. The screen behind him displayed a yellowed, handwritten page. That is my grandfather's handwriting, Finnegan said to the room. Finnegan Rourke the first, who built this tower. The silence in the ballroom was sudden and absolute. The legal counsel was frantically typing on his laptop. Blaze looked from the screen to the man in coveralls. You are a mechanic, Blaze whispered, the mic catching it. I am the owner, Finnegan replied, I like fixing things. The crowd erupted into chaos, shouting questions at the stage. Order! Blaze screamed, his face turning a blotchy red. He is a fraud. He is a lunatic. Check the bylaws. Someone shouted from the front row. The legal counsel stood up, looking pale and sick. Mr. Quarrington, we need to verify this claim immediately. The power dynamic on the stage shifted like a landslide. Isolde stepped back, realizing the magnitude of her mistake. She had betrayed the king while fearing the jester. Finnegan didn't look at her, his eyes were on Blaze. You wanted to talk about theft, Blaze, Finnegan said. Let's talk about the unauthorized dilution of stocks. He turned a page in the ledger, the paper crisp. Let's talk about the emptiness of your proxy votes. Blaze lunged for the microphone, trying to cut the audio. Finnegan stepped back, keeping the ledger out of reach. Don't touch me, Finnegan warned, his voice low and dangerous. The security guards hesitated, unsure who was in charge. Seize that book. Blaze screamed at them, panic rising. Touch that book and you're fired, Finnegan countered calmly. The guard stopped dead, looking between the two men. I am the director. Blaze roared, veins bulging in his neck. And I am the majority shareholder, Finnegan said simply. I vote that we suspend the current meeting chair. Seconded. Shouted an old man from the front row. It was Mr. Henderson, a silent partner for years. Blaze looked at Henderson, then back to Finnegan. You planned this, Blaze hissed, sweat dripping down his face. You made me pay, Finnegan said, quoting Blaze's threat. Now I am buying the company back from you. Isolde watched, her hands covering her mouth in horror. She saw the man she knew vanish into this stranger. The gentle mechanic was gone, replaced by a titan. He stood tall in his dirty clothes, looking regal. The grease on his hands looked like war paint now. This is illegal, this is a coup. Blaze stammered. It is corporate governance, the legal counsel interjected nervously. If he holds the Class A shares, he controls the board. He is a janitor. Blaze shouted, pointing a shaking finger. I worked every job in this building, Finnegan corrected. To understand what you were destroying from the top. The audience began to applaud, a slow, building thunder. Blaze looked around, realizing the trap had snapped shut. He had humiliated Finnegan to save his own skin. Instead, he had handed him the stage and the microphone. You can't do this, Blaze whispered, his power evaporating. It's already done, Finnegan said, closing the leather book. The vote was called. You are suspended effective immediately. Get off my stage, Finnegan added, pointing to the stairs. Blaze stood frozen, stripping of his dignity live on camera. He looked at Isolde, looking for someone to blame. She lied. He screamed, pointing at the nurse. She signed the false report. Arrest her. Isolde gasped, the final betrayal cutting her deep. Finnegan's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. He picked up the microphone again, silencing the room. The nurse was coerced, Finnegan announced to the crowd. Under threat of losing her license and family care. He looked at Isolde, but there was no warmth. Her statement is withdrawn from the official record. Isolde sobbed, relief and shame fighting in her chest. He had saved her, even after she stabbed him. But he did it with the cold detachment of a judge. Security, remove Mr. Quarrington, Finnegan ordered calmly. The guards grabbed Blaze, not Finnegan, this time. They dragged the screaming director off the stage. His expensive shoes scuffed the floor he had polluted. Finnegan adjusted the microphone stand, wiping off the spit. He looked out at the 500 stunned faces. Now, let's talk about the future of this company. He didn't change his clothes or wipe his face. He spoke about the boiler room and the roof. He spoke about the people who actually ran the tower. The investors listened, captivated by his raw authenticity. He was the story they would tell for years. The undercover billionaire who fixed his own elevators. Stock prices began to tick upward on the screens. Isolde tried to slip away during the speech. She moved toward the dark curtains, head down. Nurse Van Meer, Finnegan said, stopping her in her tracks. Please remain until the meeting is adjourned. She froze, terrified of what he would do next. Was he going to humiliate her now? We need to discuss the medical department budget, he said. He turned back to the crowd, ignoring her trembling. He laid out a plan to cut executive bonuses. He proposed reinvesting in infrastructure and employee wages. The room was silent, absorbing the radical shift. Then, Mr. Henderson stood up and started clapping again. One by one, the shareholders joined in the ovation. They respected power, and Finnegan had wielded it perfectly. He held up the ledger one last time. This book records every promise made and broken. From now on, we keep our promises. He walked off the stage as the applause peaked. He didn't look at the cameras or the screens. He walked straight to Isolde in the wings. She couldn't meet his eyes, staring at his boots. The backstage area was chaos, reporters trying to enter. Finnegan signaled security to block the heavy doors. He stood before Isolde, the adrenaline fading slowly. Why? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why didn't you tell me who you were? Would it have mattered? He asked, his voice flat. You chose fear over trust, Isolde. I was scared for my mother, she cried openly. I know, he said, that is why I saved you. But saving you doesn't mean I can trust you. The words were a wall between them, high and cold. I am sorry, she wept, reaching for his hand. He pulled back, tucking his hands into his pockets. The debt is paid, Isolde. You are free. I don't want to be free, I want you, she pleaded. You wanted the mechanic, he said, shaking his head. You don't know the man who owns this tower. I can learn, she begged, desperation in her eyes. The lesson is already over, he said quietly. He walked past her toward the dressing rooms. She stood alone in the dark, truly alone now. The legal team was waiting for him in the hall. They had stacks of papers for him to sign. Mr. Rourke, we need to formalize the transfer. And the press is asking for a statement. Finnegan looked at the suits, the vultures of his world. Not yet, he said, pushing past them. I have one more thing to fix first. He took the service elevator down to the basement. The silence of the shaft welcomed him back home. He took off the heavy ledger and placed it on a bench. He picked up his wrench and the oil rag. The main pulley still needed that final quarter turn. He worked on the machine, sweat mixing with grease. For a moment, he could pretend nothing had changed. But everything had changed, and he knew it. He was no longer the ghost in the machine. He was the machine itself, the owner and operator. The solitude he cherished was gone forever. He wiped his hands and looked at the elevator. It would run smoothly now, perfect and silent. Unlike his heart, which ground its gears painfully. The next day, the tower was a different world. Pictures of Finnegan in his coveralls were everywhere. The blue-collar billionaire was the headline news. He walked into the lobby wearing a simple gray suit. The staff stopped and stared, whispering as he passed. He nodded to the doorman by name, shocking him. He took the main elevator, not the service one. He went to the top floor, to the corner office. Blaze's things were being packed into cardboard boxes. The room smelled of stale cologne and panic. Blaze was there, arguing with security about a stapler. He stopped when he saw Finnegan in the doorway. "You enjoyed that, didn't you?" Blaze sneered bitterly. "No," Finnegan said, "I took no pleasure in it." "You ruined me," Blaze spat, holding a picture frame. "You ruined yourself when you underestimated people." Finnegan walked to the window, looking at the view. It was the same view as the roof, but behind glass. "You are banned from the building," Finnegan said. "And your stock options are voided for cause." Blaze dropped the box, the contents spilling out. "Isolde will never love you," Blaze said, aiming to hurt. "She only liked the charity case, not the boss." Finnegan didn't flinch, his back to the man. "Get out, Blaze," was all he said. Security escorted the former director out of the room. Finnegan stood alone in the massive, silent office. He touched the cold glass, feeling the city hum. His secretary buzzed him on the new intercom. "Mr. Rourke, Nurse Van Meer is here to see you." He hesitated, his hand hovering over the button. He could send her away, ban her like Blaze. It would be cleaner, easier, less painful. But he wasn't a man who took the easy way. "Send her in," he said, turning from the window. She entered wearing civilian clothes, not her uniform. She looked tired, her eyes red from crying. "I came to resign," she said, placing a letter down. "I can't work here after what I did." Finnegan looked at the letter, then at her. "Your mother's care is paid for by the company plan. If you quit, she loses her coverage," he stated. "I will find another job," she said, voice shaking. "Not with a black mark on your record," he countered. "Blaze is gone. The coercion is on record." He picked up her resignation letter and tore it up. "You are the best nurse this building has. I need competent people, regardless of personal history." She looked at the pieces of paper falling like snow. "You want me to stay?" she asked, hope sparking. "I want you to work," he corrected, killing the hope. "Go back to the clinic, Isolde. Do your job." "Is that all?" she asked, tears threatening again. "That is all," he said, sitting behind the desk. He opened a file, signaling the meeting was over. She stood there for a moment, then turned away. "Thank you, Finnegan," she whispered at the door. "Mr. Rourke," he corrected without looking up. The name hung in the air like a blade. She flinched, nodded, and walked out the door. He waited until the latch clicked shut. Then he slumped in the chair, burying his face. The victory tasted like ash in his mouth. He spent the afternoon reviewing the maintenance logs. He approved the budget for new copper wiring. He authorized raises for the janitorial staff. He did everything he had promised to do. But the silence in the office was deafening. He missed the noise of the elevator shaft. He missed the lunch on the windy roof. He checked the camera feed for the clinic. He saw Isolde working, checking a patient's blood pressure. She looked professional, focused, and incredibly sad. He turned the monitor off, unable to watch. He had bought the company, but sold his peace. He had justice, but he had lost his heart. This was the price of the ledger's power. Late that night, he went back to the roof. He wore his suit, shivering in the cold wind. He sat on the edge, legs dangling over the city. He opened the metal box, now empty of food. He placed the leather ledger inside and closed it. He didn't need the book anymore. He was the book now. Weeks turned into months, and the tower thrived. Efficiency was up, morale was high, profits soared. Finnegan was the golden boy of the financial press. He worked 18 hours a day to avoid thinking. He saw Isolde occasionally in the hallways or lobby. They nodded politely, like strangers who shared a secret. The distance between them was measured in floors now. One evening, the freight elevator stalled again. The new maintenance crew was struggling to fix it. Finnegan saw the alert on his computer screen. He loosened his tie and took off his jacket. He rolled up his sleeves and went down. The crew was surprised to see the CEO. "Give me the wrench," he said, crawling into the pit. He worked for an hour, grease staining his white shirt. He found the problem, a misalignment he knew well. He fixed it, feeling the satisfaction of mechanics. When he climbed out, Isolde was standing there. She was holding a towel and a bottle of water. "Old habits?" she asked, a small, sad smile. "Some things are hard to let go," he admitted. She handed him the towel, careful not to touch him. "I am paying off my loans," she said quietly. "Another 6 months and I will be clear." "Good," he said, wiping the grease from his hands. "And then?" he asked, looking at her intently. "Then I will leave," she said, "start over somewhere new. Where no one knows my name or my mistake." "You don't have to leave," he said, voice softening. "I do," she said, "because I still love you. And I can't watch you be Mr. Rourke every day." The confession hung in the humid basement air. Finnegan looked at her, seeing the pain he caused. And the pain she caused him, still fresh. "I can't go back to being the mechanic," he said. "I know," she said, "and I can't be the owner's girl. Not after I sold you for a signature." She placed the water on a crate and stepped back. "Goodbye, Finnegan," she said, using his name one last time. She turned and walked toward the exit. He wanted to call her back, to stop her. But he stayed silent, letting the elevator doors close. The annual shareholders meeting arrived a year later. Finnegan stood on the same stage, in a tailored suit. The crowd cheered him, their portfolios fat with gains. He gave a speech about growth and ethical stability. He didn't need the ledger, he spoke from memory. He looked at the wings, but no one was there. Isolde had resigned that morning, as she promised. He finished the speech and walked off to applause. He went to his office and looked at her file. Resignation accepted, he wrote with a heavy pen. He included a glowing letter of recommendation. He also included a check, labeled severance. It was enough to buy a house, or a new life. He sealed the envelope, sealing their chapter closed. He went to the window and looked at the city lights. He owned the view, the building, the company. He had won the war against men like Blaze. He had proven that integrity could be profitable. But the victory was a cold, lonely companion. He touched the glass, his reflection staring back. A rich man with a poor man's broken heart. He took the elevator down to the lobby. He walked out into the cool night air. His driver opened the door of the black car. "Home, sir?" the driver asked. "Just drive," Finnegan said, looking at the tower. It rose into the sky, a monument to his heritage. And a tomb for his only romance. He opened the ledger one last time in the car. He found the page where he met her. He crossed out the date with a single line. It was a business transaction now, closed and filed. He closed the book and looked out the window. The city moved on, indifferent to his success. He was the king of the castle, alone. Rumors of his ruthlessness began to circulate. He fired a board member for hiding expenses. He sued a supplier for cutting corners on steel. He became exactly what the company needed. A guardian who struck without mercy or hesitation. People respected him, feared him, but didn't know him. The mechanic was gone, fully absorbed by the CEO. He received a postcard 6 months later. It was from a small coastal town in the north. No message, just a picture of a lighthouse. And a signature I. He put it in the drawer with the ledger. He didn't reply, there was nothing left to say. He focused on the acquisition of a rival firm. He renovated the elevators in the tower. He installed glass walls so nothing was hidden. He removed the cameras from the service areas. He gave the workers the dignity he had fought for. But he never rode the freight elevator again. He stuck to the executive lift, swift and silent. Rising above the grime he used to live in. One day, a new nurse started in the clinic. She was young, eager, and wore the white uniform. She smiled at him in the hallway, nervous. "Good morning, Mr. Rourke," she chirped happily. "Good morning," he said, walking past without stopping. He didn't look back, he didn't slow down. He had learned the cost of looking back. He walked into the boardroom, the directors waiting. "Shall we begin?" he asked, taking the head chair. They nodded, opening their folders and laptops. "The price of the new acquisition is high," one said. "The price is always high," Finnegan replied darkly. "But we pay it because we have to." He looked at the empty chair at the end. The meeting ended, and the room cleared out. Finnegan remained, staring at the polished table. He saw his reflection, distorted in the wood. He saw the mechanic and the billionaire. They were both him, and neither of them. He stood up and buttoned his expensive jacket. He had a dinner with investors in an hour. He walked to the elevator bank, pressing the button. The doors opened, revealing the empty car. He stepped in, and for a second, he smelled it. A faint trace of floral perfume, ghost of the past. It was probably just the cleaning solution. But it made his heart skip a beat anyway. He pressed the button for the lobby. As the car descended, he closed his eyes. He allowed himself one moment of weakness. He remembered her hand on his, the rooftop wind. He remembered the betrayal, the pain, the truth. It was worth it, he lied to the empty air. The elevator chimed, signaling the ground floor. He opened his eyes, the mask slipping back on. The doors slid open to the busy, noisy lobby. He stepped out, his stride long and purposeful. He was Finnegan Rourke, the man who bought the company. The man who made them pay for their arrogance. He walked through the crowd, untouched and untouchable. He exited the revolving doors into the night. The tower stood behind him, a fortress of solitude. The wind on the street was colder than the air on the roof had ever been. Finnegan Rourke adjusted his collar, watching the steam rise from the city vents, a reminder of the machinery grinding beneath the pavement. He had exacted his revenge with the precision of a master mechanic, dismantling Blaze Quarrington and rebuilding the corporation in his own image. Justice had been served, cold and absolute, but the ledger was not balanced. He had traded intimacy for authority, warmth for respect, and love for control. Isolde was gone, a ghost in a white uniform living in a coastal town he would never visit. He had saved her future but destroyed their present, a necessary casualty in the war for his birthright. As he stepped into the waiting car, the heavy leather book in his briefcase felt lighter, its purpose fulfilled, its pages filled with the math of loss. He was the owner now, and ownership is a solitary profession. Watch closely, because the next takeover won't be hostile, it will be total. Don't look away, the machine never stops.